Yeah, that's better.
Everyone, we are live again. Dynasty Mayor Search for Uhuru, and I have a special guest with us. It's still morning time. It's still morning, not noon yet. This morning, brother Prince James Speights, also Prince Da Vito Con Deca. Did I say it right?
You said it right,
All
Prince.
right, there we go. So this is my fellow princely brother, Prince of Alada, Benin, in the former Dahomey Kingdom, which is Benin Republic now. Correct. Alada was in Dahomey.
Yeah.
Correct.
Alada was the founding kingdom of Benin. And our king is a direct descendant of the very first king and the founder, the ancestral founder of Alada, which is Adaja Hoto, and King Kokpan being the first king. Can you hear me? Good?
Yeah, I hear you. It's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
they're doing a
And
yard right now, so
oh, okay. And so Alada is the founding kingdom and the myth, and this is important to and very germane to the conversation today. And the spiritual story behind that is that Alada is the spiritual center of the kingdoms of Benin. The king of Alada is called the King of Kings because he's a direct descendant of the original ancestor that came in from what was called Tado, which is now Togo. It's the same people. And
okay.
our king of King Poti B is called the King of Kings. And subsequently, after the very first king, whose name was Kokpan, and his two brothers had a rivalry over that throne, they split. King Kokpan won. One brother went and founded Porto Novo, another one went and found Dahomey, and then the descendants, maybe 2 centuries later, of the king of the very first king of Dahomey, went and conquered Alada and Porto Novo, and thus it was called Abome, became Dahomey at that point in time. And so Alada is a very special place for many reasons. And it is the epicenter of Vodun. Most people think it is actually Ouida, but it's not.
Oh wow.
The Yeah, Alada is the spiritual center and progenitor of West African Vodun as we know it. Excuse me.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. I thought it was Wida.
No, it's, Ouida is not a kingdom, from what I understand.
Hmm.
It was a slave port. It was under the control of what they call the Cha-Cha. And at one time, Ouida was also part of Alada. And
Right,
it
it's
was
close.
under, right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it was part of that kingdom. But it's certainly the spiritual leader of Ouida, which is, our good friend. And
Dog.
Dogbo is the probably the most important figure that they have there in terms of royalty and a spiritual leader as well.
Absolutely. So tell everybody. You have to share with everybody your story as far as
Mhm.
how you were able to link back to the King of Alada, and you have to start from
Okay.
the beginning, like how you got the DNA results, and
Mhm. All right.
if
Well, it will not put me in the best of light, but I'll share it
please.
anyway. A good friend of mine, a young lady you spoke to
Uh,
yesterday, Sharon Breland, for about a year, asked me to look at to join this project called the Royal DNA Project.
okay.
Um, it was started by two women, Princess Ada Anejo Brown and Naja. I can't think of her name. And they went, well, Ada did, went around to West African kingdoms and secured DNA from the royal families. And they then placed it online by having them take the DNA test through, it could have been 23andMe, one of the major DNA testing sites. From there, they put it on something called Genesis.ged match. And so if you had a test, a DNA results from one of those tests, be it from Ancestry.com, which mine was Living DNA, also had one from there, 23andMe, MyHeritage, then you could go on to Genesis.ged match, upload your raw DNA material from the other website, and then you could search through the matches and you find, you'll if you saw royal DNA match, then you had to go back and contact them to tell them that you found this. So that's essentially what I did. But it took Sharon a long amount of time to convince me to do that, and
Why?
kind of, well, I mean, I didn't care. I mean, I wasn't a fan of royalty. I'm a political
Okay.
scientist, and I thought that
Okay.
that was an antiquated system.
Uh-huh.
And my focus was really finding on my father's side. It can go back as far as my great grandfather, my first generation great grandfather. But I wanted to find out more about the Speights' journey here in America, and really not focusing on or thinking that it's possible to go all the way back to, the place of origin in Africa on my mother's side, because of the Spanish and Irish and Scottish and American, and primarily the Spanish DNA there. Florida, through that was under the rule of the Empire of Spain until 1820. Those records, birth and death records and marriage records, were very much intact. So I could all go all the way back to my fifth generation great grandfather and figure out how he got here and all that. But my name is Speights, so I wanted more information. So when I went on to the site and I had Sharon kind of on the phone, and I looked at the matches that I had, and I went, oh wow, I got one of those Royal DNA matches. And she kind of laughed and said, I've been trying to get one for 2 years, and here you go on there for 5 minutes. And so so I didn't think about it much because it appeared as though, for whatever reason, that no further contact was possible. And so Dogbo came to town,
Right.
and Adab introduced me to Dewoti, and I hosted I'm a minister, so I hosted a faith dialogue with Dogbo here in Washington with other ministers and faith and culture leaders. And so he had a fellow with him named Achade, Denny Asongba. And I showed them the picture in the DNA match, and Asongba says, "Oh, I know your king very well. He's kind of a flamboyant fellow."
Uh,
So, I picked up the phone, called the king. Of course, he hung up on me. I guess cold call the king. You
right.
know,
Right.
and but I've had great success in cold calling high-ranking dignitaries before. I was able to represent the country of Nigeria under General Obasanjo because somebody gave me his phone number by accident. I asked for the president's office number. This guy gave me the actual cell number for the president, and he hung up on me 3 times, and I kept calling him back, and he said, "So I realize that you are crazy now. So what is it that you want?" I said,
Uh-huh.
"Well, who am I talking to?" He says, "You don't know who you're talking to?" And then he explained who I was talking to. I said, "Cool, well, here's what I want." And so I was persistent and called the king back. And I think now he was hanging up on me because he didn't understand.
Right.
And so then he gave his wife, Queen Dejame, who's kind of the hero and central figure in my story, the
Uh-huh.
telephone. She told me to write her, and I wrote her back and explained what I wanted and what I had in terms of DNA. And a week passed by, and then one morning about 4 o'clock, my phone went off, and she wrote back to me and said, "It's with great delight that we are reading this message from you. You are, in fact, were born a prince if you're related to this family, and here's why. And it's with great anticipation that we await for your reply to come home and visit." And that's how it started, and it's been a divinely inspired journey ever since that has, seriously altered my life in so many ways. I and you were there when I arrived.
Uh-huh.
So I even just thought that in going there, I would get off the plane, slap a few bags, "Hey, cuz, how you doing?" Maybe go out, have a dinner, see the village. But no, it was much larger than that. You saw the greeting at the airport, and it even was more overwhelming when I got to the palace. But to cut through to some things and the what I experienced in terms of how I was received. And basically, after you all left the palace after that big celebration, they kind of took me to Prince school. I mean, really explaining my heritage, the myths, the spirituality. They didn't tell me that I had to be introduced to the ancestors and that they had to accept me. I mean, like, okay, so let me get this straight. I sprung for the ticket. I bought all these gifts, and now the ancestors, have to accept me. But it is I was immediately altered at that point because Up until that point in time, like most African Americans, we were living our lives with a patched together narrative about who and what we are. And certainly that extends to a family and personal narrative as well, because we don't know. What we know is we have a link to a place called Africa, and Africa is just a construct, and the word was actually invented by the Roman Empire to label the capital of Carthage. It was called Africa, and so that word was applied to the whole continent. But as you know more than me, because and by the way, I have to thank you for introducing me to Benin and Vodou, because the first thing I saw your videos and I watched everything you did, and yeah, you were a big part of it. It really made me want to go. But to have Africa is, you can't look at Nigeria. There's really, I mean, there's a Nigeria now, but Nigeria, Benin, they're all comprised of ancient kingdoms. And that's how you have to look at Africa and understand your true link there, and where you came from. You know, when we look at somebody and say, oh, he's African, no, no, not really. I mean, he's from the continent of what is known as Africa, but he could be Yoruba, he could be Igbo, he could be Fulani, he could be so many things. And that speaks more to your ancient history and who you are than anything. And so, and then when you discover that, then you have to look at the stories and the myths behind those groups of people and those kingdoms. That really determines what's in your blood. This white minister, and I'm saying he's white to make a point, did a sermon that I discovered online about my journey, because he read the article in the Washington Post. It could have been in Reader's Digest or any one of the other outlets that carried my story. And he said, when you know to know your story, the whole set of stories that makes you exactly who you are is powerful. And that's just it. We don't know the whole set of stories that makes us exactly who you are, but there are some indicators about who we are. If you're in America and you're African American, well, first of all, you're related to a pretty strong person. Whoever it was that survived that Middle Passage had to be a person of great faith. Let's say that first, great faith. And that faith wasn't Christianity. You know, it could have been Islam, some, but more than likely it was one of the indigenous and traditional African spiritual systems. It was that faith and that strength that got them through that. Through what, 2 months of laying almost on your back, can barely sit up with feces from other people falling on you, very little to eat, being whipped, being raped, being abused in all types of ways. That's the narrative. That's part of the narrative. Instead of, and you and I discussed this, and a lot of people give me flack for it, and they've kind of told me to exclude this from my story. But we were captured warriors, sold into slavery. We were never slaves. We were captured warriors, dignitaries, kings, queens, princesses, you name it, artisans. These were noble people that were somebody wherever they came from. What's the narrative we hear in Alex Haley's book, and so many history books? It's almost like, remember Elmer Fudd in the cartoons? You may be too young to remember him. You know, I was walking through the park one day. Huh? You remember? Okay. Can you hear me?
Oh, so I muted myself because they're doing the lawn outside. So
Oh,
if
okay.
I don't want the leaf blower
All
to,
right. Yeah.
you know,
So that,
interfere.
okay, thanks. So we're not the hapless Negro that was, running through the forest trying to make a drum or gather some wood. No, we were captured in battle. A lot of people were captured maybe singularly by the slave traders, but let's look at that. In my kingdom alone, it's an interior kingdom, Dahomey, interior. So the ships came into Wedo, one of the other ports. They had to go inland to make contact with the king and his dignitaries to even cut a deal to get slaves. They had to talk to the king or one of his dignitaries first. They didn't allow the ships or the people or the crew, maybe 50 was a lot of crew members for a slave ship. So how much capturing can you do? Even if they had the guns, they had single shot guns almost well up into the 1800s. So no, our people went down with a fight. They were victims and captives of war. And in Wheat, as you know, when you take the tour, they make that very clear that they were captives of war. And that switch, that shift in our narrative right there is a beginning point for us to feel more empowered and just better about who we are and where we came from. So that's, I think what we all have to do is examine how we see ourselves historically and craft a better narrative. And the word myth, let's say, I believe as a minister, the majority of religious texts are myth. They're myths. Um, and I've always wanted a myth. Ever since I was at Howard University, I really studied mythology. And you can't, and the myths of a society determine how people chart their life courses and paths. And that's very important. So let's look at our myths. We don't know what our myths are. We don't know those great stories. The Italians have the great Roman gods myth. The Greeks have Hercules and all those stories. Egyptian, that's an African spiritual system. But now I have a myth, and that myth from Alada is a great hunter encountered a beautiful woman in a forest who could shift into a panther. And when she shed her skin, she would be a beautiful woman. He stole the woman's skin, this panther skin, and when she came back to get it, convinced her to marry him. And then they did get married, and they had a son, and this son's name was Kopan, Adajahotu, the founding ancestor of our kingdom, and he just was beset with attacks and abuse by the fellow villagers in Tado, which is Togo, because he had panther-like characteristics. So he upped and moved and eventually ended up in the village of Tagordo, where the palace of Alada is. And that is a powerful myth. And the children and descendants of Adajahotu, the great hunter, are children of the panther. Well, that works for me. That works much better than whoever was walking in the woods or down the beach and got a net thrown over them. You ended up, in America, and it was downhill ever since then. That works. That's empowering. That's a solid myth, and I'm sure that's across the continent. And if we can tap into that, it changes you foundationally, fundamentally, who you are, how you think about yourself, how you perceive yourself, how you will go through life. Even at my older age, I'm not ancient, but I'm older, it's altered me. It's changed me. Just the knowledge of that has changed my children, my brother, my grandchildren. My granddaughter is 5, and here's what's beautiful. My daughter is an elementary school teacher. My youngest daughter, and her grand Kristen, and my granddaughter Zoe is now 5. So last year when I got back from Alada, she showed my daughter showed Zoe a picture of the king and queen, and she said, "Do you see?" And with other people, and she said, "Do you see a king and a queen in this picture?" And so she could pick them out. It's obvious, right? Then she showed her a picture of me with them, dressed in, my traditional dress, and she says, "Do you still see the king and queen?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "Do you see Pop Pop?" She said, "Yes." She said, "Is Pop Pop a king?" She said, and my daughter said, "No, he's a prince." She says, "Am I a princess?" She said, "Yes." And from that point on, the way she plays with her dolls is different. I mean, she was always a princess, like little girls, they walk around in the princess stuff, but now it's serious to her. I bought my grandson a panther doll, for lack of a figure, of the Black Panther. And my daughter found out a way to explain that to them. And now they'll grow up with that knowledge and that sense of empowerment all their life. That is very important. My father didn't leave me a pot of gold or a big bank account, but I'll take this legacy any day over all that. Any questions?
I muted myself because
Mm-hmm.
they're outside doing the lawn. So
Yes,
But
Prince. I
like
understand that you have. I understand you have household staff, Prince. I got
oh,
it.
it's a long man.
I
So
hear you.
the question is, what is the meaning of your name?
Okay, Da is a title. It means high dignitary. In some cases, it can be mean king, like Dagbo. But for me, it means high dignitary. And the manner in which I am a dignitary is I'm the ambassador from the kingdom of Allah. And so you have to be enthroned, which you attended that enthronement to get that title. The name Vidacon, and I understand it's a powerful name because when I say it to anybody from Benin, they really tell me how powerful the name is. It means the child who came, the child who watches the green. And so that's an important spiritual name, for them. The name is bestowed as a result of ancestral consultation and a Fa reading. And so is the title Da. You can return there and not actually get those titles. So they found me fit, and I'm trying to honor that and step into it and still maintain who I am and bring what I can, to that title and that name.
Now, as far as your role, what are you responsible for? Like, what's the expectations, I guess?
Well, the expectations are that well, first of all, that you always represent the kingdom in the highest and best light. That's one. The projects that I'm working on are to establish a better connection and identify our people in the diaspora. And, a lot of the media coverage that I've received has really drawn a lot of people to me. There's a woman that I used to see every morning when I went to Giant. Giant is a grocery store here. And most mornings she would take care of me. When I got back from Africa, um, I told her all about the trip because she hadn't seen me in 6 days because I go in there every morning. And when the Washington Post article hit about my story, I went in there and bought 10 newspapers. And she said, "Why are you buying all that? You never buy a newspaper." So I showed her the story. And right then and there, I told her, I said, "You actually look like you could be a member of the Decca family or from the folks in Tagordo." Cut a long story short, she gave me her DNA. I showed her how to upload it onto the site. Not only is she my cousin, she's also related to the Decca. So, I was right. It's kind of like the king looking at in Nigeria, looking at you. The other to help with the other projects, just in general, to promote Alada as a spiritual center and the history of it. I've contacted many historical sources and have found items such as um, a crown that the Dutch stole from a British ship and took it to Holland, and it was meant for the King of Alada. I found sacred papers in Spain in the Royal Library. Other projects to help bring water, lights, things like that to the village of Tagordo. I've put in 2 metered pumps so far, and that's helped a good amount of people. The objective is to build a well that requires a larger amount of money, but I think my route might be just to work on these metered wells. And something you may be interested in, let me get one and show you. Just give me 1 second.
Everyone, thank you for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button as you come into the chat room. Also, if you're new, please subscribe. We have a fellow Prince on with us as well. Um, Prince Da Vidokon Deka, um, also known as Brother James Speights, who I've known now for a little over a year, who's a prince in Alada Benin Republic. So I'm gonna mute my mic again because it's just loud in the background.
As far as electricity, uh, I'm sure there's a way to get somebody involved in electricity. But I saw this actually on Shark Tank. This can provide 300 light for illuminate a 300-foot square room. It requires solar charging, and it's a telephone chart, and it charges a cell phone as well. So my plan is to supply every household in the village of Tagorda with one of these. I'm taking about 30 on this trip to field test them to see if they hold up. And so these are simple things until I can put in place, a much larger plan. I'm the city of Alexandria. They have a Rotary Club, and they've offered to partner with me with their club and the National Rotary Organization to perhaps look at putting a more substantial water project in the village. But when you ride up that hill, going to the palace in Tagordo, Prince, most of those people don't have water. And you can see them carrying the buckets or big jugs of water and the like. And so to put in a 1 meter is 7,000 CFAs. That's a lot of money for them. You know how much money that is for us? It's $200. And the water bill and is about $30 a month. And that's with a whole bunch of people using it. So I would imagine that maybe a couple of hundred people or more use the two pumps that I put in, already. So I'm doing what I can with my personal finances, but to get money there and everything, you have to have the structure, the 501(c)(3), because if I collect the monies here, they have to be accounted for, through the IRS. And just being another thing is just the regular duties of an ambassador. I go to the embassy a lot. I speak at events, and insert myself where I think I can make a statement about our culture and our history. Um, and one of the ways I'm going to do that is I'm writing a book, which is being edited now. And I actually received a movie offer on my story. But if I do it, it's by a well known actor, producer. But if I do it, I want it to really I want it to be informative and focus on the history of the kingdom because there's a lot there. There's a lot to be proud of about Alada, and there's a lot that causes me great tension. It was one of the founding. It was at the very early phases of the slave trade. They made first contact with the Portuguese in West Africa, and so
Uh,
for ye,
Prince,
yeah,
quick question. Sorry to cut
yeah,
you off.
yeah.
Do you think during the time of the slave trade that they were aware of the long causing effects of what they were getting involved in?
I would have to say initially no, because they had a different um, approach to slavery. It wasn't chattel slavery as what was applied here in the United States. But I'm going to say this, and I'll say it, and I really don't care who likes the statement or wants to disagree with it. To be a devout people, and as you know, they are devout in terms of their practice of Vodun. It was a breakdown of applying their spiritual values. And I think immorality at any given point in time in history, in the history of a people where you mistreat people, you enslave them, they had to know at least that that was wrong. I don't think that they had an idea what happened on the other side. I think by the time it got to the Dahomey Empire, who elevated the slave trade to an, just to a whole different level of a business transaction, they had an idea. They had an idea, but they were thriving off of it. Their rationale is, and of course, and I can understand this to some extent, that they had to get the oil empire out of their affairs. They were a satellite of the oil empire and paying tribute to them. And so they used the guns and the technology from the Europeans um, to do that. But they have to really, and I don't think it's been done right, that they have to make a strong historic statement about what they understood. One president has apologized for it, but it's not even in the history books in Benin. The slave trade is, for the most part, overlooked. And I see part of my role as to bridge that divide, to bring awareness to it. A lot of African Americans ask me, how can we be proud of that legacy? Well, okay, I now know that my name is Decca. All right. So am I really Jay Speights? I mean, I walk by slaveholders every day. I mean, the descendants of slaveholders. I probably break bread with them. When I go home to Florida, I know families that held slaves down there because my parents told me who they were. So this is really about identity. And if I can get over get over all that living in America, all the historic trauma and vestiges of the slave trade that impacted our entire community, me personally and my family, then I can come to grips with my family being a slave trading family. I just have to work through it. And that's really it. I just have to, simply work through it.
Now, where you're from in Alada is
Mm,
also the is where Tucson of the Tour originates from as well. Or
exactly.
did they talk about that during your initiation at all, or?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me? I had to take my headset off. Okay. Yeah, they did. That's one of the first things you hear. And actually, he was a prince, just like I am. His father was the brother of Copan, I believe, the first king. And the way they ended up in Haiti was that after, I think, 1724, when Dahomey marched in and conquered Alada, these are two kindred kingdoms, and enslaved about 8,000 people and killed the rest. Um, Prince Ganao, or the Overture's father, willingly got on the slave ship. My family told me, and so did Her Majesty, that it was known for people to leave. Now, maybe the Queen didn't tell me that, but definitely my family, that some people voluntarily got on the ships. And they didn't voluntarily get on the ships, I think, to be enslaved. You have to understand there was a working relationship between the nobles and the kings and the slave traders. They knew them. There are letters between the King of Alada and James II of England. So they looked at it as royalty is royalty, and they're not going to be mistreated. But they were wrong. And so Toussaint Overture is important. There's several important things that you need to know about him. A, he is from the Kingdom of Alada. B, when he the night before he fought the Napoleon's army, did you see the? You were there when I refused to drink out of a cup in the in the forest.
Exactly. So you guys performed the same ritual that they performed
Yeah,
before
that
they
ritual.
declared war against the French.
Yes, and that was indeed empowering just to hear those words about my ancestors and to give me that power and strength. That's life altering. But the tactics of warfare used by Toussaint Overture, he learned from a woman named Dessalines, who was an Amazon. That's an Amazon. So those were Dahomean war tactics that were used to defeat Napoleon. Not only did they defeat Napoleon, they defeated the English and the British. But the important thing is, and I call Aladad a little kingdom that roared. And here's why. After the defeat of Napoleon's army, he decided to divest his interest in the Western Hemisphere because there was so much going on in Europe, because he was fighting wars on all those fronts, that he sold his holdings in the Western Hemisphere to the United States, which was the Louisiana Purchase. And that's a direct spillover from his defeat by Toussaint. Subsequently, a lot of the folks from Haiti moved into New Orleans. They bought the music, the costumes, and if you've been to Mardi Gras, the goons and the outfits and everything and the beads, that's you see that in Benin. That culture. That music that they bought was infused into the black church, which became spirituals and gospels and eventually became jazz, blues, rock and roll. So Alada has had a global impact, and that's part of my mission is to promote that as well.
Now, also too, what happened? I guess when the Haitians are came to Louisiana,
Mm-hmm.
that was before the Louisiana Purchase, correct? Or was it
But
during
right after the war, immediately after, they had to
or
leave.
after the war? But I think what happened too is after the war, when the Louisiana Purchase happened, they were somewhat re-enslaved as well.
Some
From
of
my,
them were, yes, the majority of them, I believe, and they bought Vodun with them.
Mhm.
And Vodun is very much similar to early black church, um, uh, the structure of the early black church. For
Right.
example, I have a friend who's an
Holy
AME
Spirit,
pastor. Yeah, right.
Holy
Yeah,
Ghost.
the shouting, the tambourines. I have a friend who's white, who is a pastor of an AME church, and you can see this in other African American churches as well. The pastor's wife wears the biggest hat. Well, the way you identify a Queen Mother in the village is she has on what? The biggest headdress. So there
Right.
are things there that are similar. And this is, again, part of knowing your myth and your story. And it can make you feel empowered. We have to know these things and understand our worship. All over the globe, people credit all these European and Eastern um, spiritual systems with this high level of worship and inspiration and awe. Well, the same elements are present in African spirituality. And I would say that the Yoruba tradition and Vodun very much influenced Christianity. The same system that is in Benin is in the Egyptian systems, which Europe tries to say the Egyptians were influenced by European technology. The African spiritual systems believe in a divine spiritual being. For the most part, they call them Loas or Orishas that are under that divine spiritual um, being, which translate into saints in Christian religion, and they take care of various aspects of existence in life. They act as a representative of the primary God. And some of the earlier founders of Christianity were indeed African, like Saint Augustine. So you can't say that he could not have possibly brought that awareness, to and that awareness, and which informed his approach to um, developing some of the earlier Christian theologies and tenets.
Now let's get into the festival. So I tell people this: the festival in Alada has always been my favorite festival. January 9th every year has always been my favorite festival, even more than the festival in Ouida.
Right.
So this year is going to be 3 days. But tell people about the festival, why it's celebrated on January 9th. And
Mm-hmm. Well, let me start by saying Queen Dejame, Pody B, um, is spearheading and heading up the festival, and it's usually one day. And it's really and the reason it's held on January 9th, which is not the holiday, the national holiday. It's the first day of the nationwide festival where they celebrate the official religion, which is Vodun. It's because Allah is the first kingdom. And it's really their statement, not only to the country, but to the world, that they treasure this tradition, that they think it's valuable, and they want to inform the world about it. And so this year it's 3 days, and they're going to highlight the various aspects of our spiritual system. And you'll see the Ngungun, your favorite folks, the Zangbetos. You love those Zangbetos. They'll have the priests and priestesses there, the food, the artisans. It's going to be a grand celebration. It's been going on for about 25 years. And each year the king is very generous in allowing people to participate. This year he's going to open up the palace and all the sacred sites that only people like me were allowed to see. The Temple of the Kings. The first night I had to go before the Temple of the Kings and go right to the king that has my name, that I have his name, and we did a ritual there. The Sacred Lake, which has not been open. Zimbali, that was the first time when I was enthroned that Zimbali was open to the public, the sacred forest. And women aren't allowed there to this day. So, um, but Queen Dejami is pulling together an excellent job. They're expecting thousands and thousands of people this time, and it really gives you a good snapshot and understanding of the root of the foundation of Vodun and how it's applied. No people are running around screaming and hollering and possessed, as in the context of how Western society perceives it. The basic tenets, and this is so important that the tenets are of Vodun, a divine genderless God. It's a binary God, male and female, which I like. A belief that all of creation is sacred, that there's saints or Loas that take care of various aspects of creation, and that the and that the ancestors play an everyday role in our lives. The veneration, not worship, veneration of ancestors. And let me tell you, with that awareness, when I came back, it really is a big spiritual check, a focus on ancestor veneration, because we all do things in private that we don't want folks to know that we do, right? But when you do those things in private and you say to yourself, and I'm going to cuss for a minute, damn, my mom and grandma and granddad may be watching me. So I better clean up my act. And that just fosters a stronger sense of self awareness in a family unit. This year, they really are going to focus on those foundational tenets of Vodun, the connection to the ancestors. And one of our myths and spiritual beliefs in about the king of Aladah is that he possesses those powers of the ancestor and that he can transform into a panther. And he's going to explain that actually at this festival. So this is all very interesting, and it's going to be the first time it's been on this level, and I'm certainly looking forward to it. If you can't make it this year, I would. If you're American, it can do nothing but help empower you and strengthen your sense of self and your past to come there and to see when you see the palace, you're looking at 700 or 800 years of history, not of people running around willy nilly beating drums with no sense of order. This was a well organized administrative hub and kingdom that had a highly structured sense of highly structured spiritual system, along with an administrative system and bureaucracy. And that's what you get when you leave this. Your culture and your spirituality are inextricable for the most part. One informs the other, and the two combined really make your society what it is and lays the foundation for how people that are associated and linked to that society proceed throughout life and with the understanding of their past, the spirituality that flows within their DNA, the greatness that flows within their DNA, and the mythologies behind that. And you become a new person when you're exposed to that. I can look at you and your videos and see how much you enjoy them and how they transformed you in so many ways.
Speaking of at Google,
There it is.
speaking
There's
of at Google,
love it. See? Now, if you look at that, you can see New Orleans. You can see Mardi Gras in that. And so that's the festival. And the queen is very proud. She's very tired. Um, and I've been receiving emails and updates from her. The sacred lake of Adajahoto, when he first got to the plateau where Tagordo and Aladah is located, he had a bloody shirt after the battle and he stuck it into a stream to wash it and it expanded into a great lake. So that lake's going to be open too. And she had the thing graded. She had to get the snakes out of there and all that. I'm glad she got those snakes out of there. So um, that's it.
well, I'm looking forward to it. I will be there January
Mhm.
9th. This will be my fourth one.
I know.
This will be my fourth one. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, my favorite festival out of all the festivals.
Hmm.
So basically, January 9th, Salada.
Hmm.
January 10th is the main one in Weta.
Yeah, but we're on the 11th
11th.
as well. January 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Oh, well, it's a lot of this year, but usually
Yeah,
it's 9th,
yeah.
a
Hmm.
lot of
Right.
10th, Weta,
Yeah,
11th, Grand Popo,
right.
January 12th is Poso Tome. So those are like usually
Yeah. And
and they
it's
usually have something going on in Porto Novo as
yeah,
well.
that's kind of like a big jazz concert from what I understand.
Which one?
Porto Novo.
I haven't. So last year I didn't go to the actual. In fact, I take that back. I went to like the opening day, but it was just more just vendors and stuff. I really didn't see
Right. Yeah.
anything.
Well, I'd like to get over there before I go.
No. Have you been to Port? You've been to Porto Novo, have you?
No, you know,
Oh.
my first trip last year was so structured that
Yeah, yeah. You couldn't do anything. Yeah,
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 I
yeah.
just kind of told what I should do. They even locked me in my hotel at night. You know, one thing that's funny, I have to tell you all this. So we get to the
Go.
hotel after I do all these rituals, and so I had bodyguards, right? So
Right. You did. Hmm.
yeah, they locked me in the hotel. The Queen's brother closes the door. He says, "Well, if somebody knocks on the door and you don't recognize them, don't open the door." And I'm like, "Now, how can I go to sleep with that thought?" I had to go out in the room and figure out an escape route out of the hotel room. And somebody saw me and said, "What are you doing?" And I told them what the Queen's brother said. He said, "Nothing's going to happen." I think he just
Yeah.
said that. So then I was able to go back up and go to sleep. But at no time did I ever feel threatened. I felt at home. It just was just a beautiful feeling, and to you know look at hundreds of people and know these are all my cousins. Just beautiful, just beautiful.
People, are there any other questions in the chat room? Like I said, I will be there January 9th. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Have a great time. Um, let's see here. Any other questions in the chat room for the Prince? Anyone? So how can people get in contact with you if they're gonna come to Benin and they're interested in coming to the festival?
You can hit me up on Facebook, Jay Speights, JaySpeights, or jayspates.com, JaySpeights.com.
Mm.
Those are easiest two ways, and my email is right there on my webpage.
All right, cool.
Or,
Anything else?
or I can
Okay.
tell my email address here. I thought I could type it up.
No, no, no. I'll do it right now. Let's
All right.
see. I'll put your website on there. Everybody, go to the website.
You haven't seen my card, have you?
I have it. Let me see. Let me see. Okay.
Now, wait a minute, that's the wrong one. Wait a minute, hold on. No, I got a different one made than that. That was the first draft. You inspired me to do something different. So that's the front of the card.
Okay. Let me see the back. There we go.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
right. And
Yes,
my
sir.
email's right there if you
Hmm.
want to. That's one email. But I'd be glad to speak with anybody about the festival as well as about your DNA and the importance of it because I know what this has done for me. And and let's put aside the whole royalty connect for a minute. Not everybody's going to have that. But when I got out of that car at the palace, I just looked around and I didn't think about being a prince. It was like, wow, this is ground zero for my family, and I'm related to all these folks. That that's just enough in and of itself, right there, to look at the map, to look at the globe of this planet and say, hey, I know a part of me, the big part of me, comes from right there. That's the feeling that everybody should get. That's the feeling everybody should have. And it's life altering and it uplifts you. And I think that African Americans, we need a new narrative. We need a new myth. It's going to Howard in the 70s. I always heard we come from kings and queens. Well, but, me being the way I'm structured internally, yeah, but what king and queen do I come from? Where is that place? And I always thought of that as just being empty rhetoric because we didn't know. You know now, and I know. And
Right.
everybody else through modern science now, everybody can know.
Exactly.
Most, yeah, so why not do this?
All right. Any other questions from the chat room? Everyone who's super chatting, thank you for the super chats. Anything you'd like to share in closing, Prince?
No, other than incorporate some of these traditions, even if you can't make it to Africa,
Hmm.
follow you, because you do a very good job of bringing that to us. But do some reading on the spiritual traditions of Africa. They're not something to be shunned or diminished. And start reading and adapting some of those myths and applying them in those teachings in your life. That's who you are. That person that came over on the Middle Passage brought that spirituality, those myths with them. Maybe they weren't able to communicate them to us through the subsequent generations, but you can go back and recapture them for yourself. If you don't know where you came from, find an African spiritual myth that suits you. Start reading the Proverbs. This is who you are. This is what's in your DNA. And it's
Mm,
important to know that.
mm.
Spirituality, just like physical strengths and weaknesses, is encoded in your DNA. The trauma, the suffering, all that's there. And if all that can be there, then you know the spiritual stories, the things that make you great are in there too. And that's what we have to tap into, and we'll be a much stronger community for it.
Absolutely. So, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Prince Don, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Prince.
I will see you in about 10 days.
Yeah, looking
Soon.
forward.
Yeah, I'll see you soon.
Okay, I'm gonna go out and eat with you this time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm gonna see. I don't know if I'm getting to Benin on the 7th or the 8th,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll be in Wheat on the 8th. You said, right?
I'll be in wheat on 8th. Yeah.
So for sure on the 8th, we'll
Okay.
go hang out somewhere.
And my
Yeah.
brother's like you; he'll eat anything.
Okay.
You
Oh
know,
yeah.
so he's already been watching your stuff.
Oh good, good,
Look at
good,
these
good, good.
lights. Remember these. And this, this is through a nonprofit that I saw on Shark Tank, an
Okay.
action project, and I think this could be life altering in many of the outlying areas, which Alada, is. It's not a big thriving city. So, and I'm going to get back to you because I want to do a fundraiser where people can just give these lights to anywhere on the continent, or even to your group to
Oh,
take
absolutely.
with you.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. All right.
I'm
God
glad.
bless you. Thank you for Prince.
You too. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure you go to dynastymember.com, like, share, subscribe if you're new. Until next time, family. Peace.
Peace.